I confess that in 1901 I said to my brother Orville that man would not fly for 50 years. 2 years later, we ourselves made flights. This demonstration of my impotence as a prophet gave me such a shock that ever since I've distrusted myself and avoided all predictions.
Den interplanetære podcasten. Utforskning av rom til fordel for hele menneskeheten. Dine verter i England og Norge, Matthew Russell og Chris Carney.
Oh yeah, baby.
Right.
Wilbur right.
Right on, brothers.
We've literally started this podcast very right on.
Yes.
Now, Wilbur Wright, it was his birthday the other day, and
what did he get?
I don't know, but whose birthday is it today, Chris?
Matthew, it's mine.
No way.
No way indeed. And you couldn't find anybody that was born on the same day as me, April the 18th, could you?
April the 18th. Nothing happened. So famously so that in 1930, even the BBC announced that there'd been no news that day.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, yeah, literally, there's been no astronomer, no astronaut, nothing.
Until now.
Birthday, Chris.
Until now. There's a few people that don't really count. There's James Woods, and he's a bit of a right-wing lunatic on Twitter these days. There's Rick Moranis, that's pretty good. There's Courtney Kardashian. But also, it's a double header of science fiction because I share a birthday with David Tennant, former Doctor, and I'm 42.
That is fair. I mean, 42, that's as good as it gets.
It is.
I believe binary for 42 is 101010.
You're joking. Is that what it was all about?
Do you know it might be?
I will accept it as that.
He told Stephen Fry, didn't he? Just before Douglas Adams told Stephen Fry what 42 was about. And so Stephen Fry knows, but promised he'd never tell anyone.
No, he must on the deathbed, which I hope is a very, very long time from now, Stephen Fry. I hope he divulges to somebody.
I hope he passes it on to someone equally cool.
Yeah,
that'd be
definitely.
quite good.
Definitely.
I hope he passes it on to another natural materialist.
Yeah, yes, a natural materialist.
Yes, a materialist. Tomorrow, when the podcast comes out, will be the anniversary of Salyut 1, the first space station.
Amazing.
19th of April, 1971. So that's 50 years ago.
Fantastic.
50 years since the first space station.
That's a big old deal, that, isn't it? That's a fantastic landmark.
It is, isn't it? 50 years since Salyut 1.
Or should I say space mark?
Ah, you should. It is a space mark, like a landmark, isn't it?
Yeah.
A space mark achievement. That's a space mark achievement. Well, talking of space mark achievements, Chris, this is a space news episode.
One of my favourite kinds.
Yes, I know. I know you love it. I mean, fancy that. A space news episode on your birthday.
Yep.
And this is perhaps one of the biggest pieces of space news we've ever had on the podcast.
Oh my goodness.
And that is the shock SpaceX win of the human lander contract for Artemis.
Amazing.
It's unbelievable. Genuinely, I was shocked, but the more I think about it, I've realised I was a bit of an idiot for being shocked.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting it. I'm pretty certain on a previous podcast I've probably said as if SpaceX are going to win that particular contract because it just seems so preposterous.
Yeah, it's completely out of their realm right now, isn't it?
Well, we should first of all explain what it is. It's the human lunar lander contract was basically NASA saying to private industry, right, one of you've got to come up with a way of getting down from lunar orbit and delivering the astronauts safely onto the moon, letting them stay there for a week, and then bringing them back up into lunar orbit. That's what you've got to achieve.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, is no mean feat.
Not in the slightest, no.
No, there was about 5 or 6 different companies involved initially, but that sort of whittled down to 3 contenders, which was the national team, Blue Origin, but with Lockheed and Northrop Grumman in there as well. So that's a major team. That is like your big hitters.
Yeah.
And then there was this other team called Dynetics, which have Sierra Nevada Corporation buried in there as well. So that, these are big industrial teams. And then at the last minute, NASA included SpaceX and their Starship landing system.
Yeah.
And this was about 12 months ago. And at the time, it felt like they'd sort of been included almost on a whim. That's what it felt like. I mean, it was like, because SpaceX came in insanely cheap.
Yeah.
About half the cost of Dynetics and a quarter of the cost of the national team. Have you seen a picture of 3 different systems placed next to each other?
Yeah.
The Starship just looks preposterous. It just looks preposterous compared to these 2 little dinky landers, which are much more like the traditional kind of landers.
Yeah.
Although the Dynetics one is very, very cool in the fact that they've kind of, instead of stacking it up, they've stacked it across. So it's a very sort of weird, long ship rather than a tall ship. But still, they're both quite traditional, going back to those very early Space Society drawings of lunar landings.
Yeah.
The sort of thing that was dreamt up in Liverpool back in, just after the Second World War, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
A bit like your grandparents dreaming up your parents.
Yeah, well, let's not go into how they made them.
So sort of similar period to that. Whereas obviously Starship is completely different.
Yeah.
It's completely different. And so SpaceX have won it. Not only is it a surprise, but it was all a bit weird how it was announced. It was announced, seemed like a bit of a rush on a Friday afternoon because I think NASA wanted to get ahead of a press leak. So it was a bit odd, the announcement. It kind of, whoa, what's going on here? But almost $3 billion have been awarded to SpaceX on their own, and the other 2 didn't get a look in, which was, I mean, Jeff Bezos must be totally gutted by that.
Yeah.
As in, it must have genuinely been, that's a kicker, that is. If you're reading Twitter, the vibe I get from the old school radical accelerationists who want us to go into space as quickly as possible and actually get on with it, I think they consider this like you said, a space mark event where we'll be talking about this for decades, if not centuries, that this was a turning point in the human exploration of space.
I thought it was a mistake, when I saw the announcement, especially because I think maybe some of the press might have got that a bit wrong because they actually showed just the literal starship on the moon. Just sat there like it's just touched down, and I was like, that can't be right. But it's almost like they added them to the bill, like that kid that in your class that you have to invite to your birthday party. It's like, oh god, we better invite SpaceX onto this.
Well, but I mean, imagine how far SpaceX are. They're only 19 years old as a company.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long ago that Elon Musk was having to sue NASA, take them to court.
Yeah.
To make them give him contracts, which is never the best way to sort of endear yourself to someone you want work from.
It's a bit tantrumy, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's massively paid off for him because now it seems that NASA just want to trust SpaceX with everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Artemis, apparently, Artemis Mission 3 will be returning astronauts to the moon in 2024, which is 3 years away, which, let's face it, that if you're watching Starship landing in Boca Chica, you know that that's probably not realistic. 2024. But apparently that's the plan, 2024. So it's to carry 2 American astronauts to the lunar surface. One of which will be the first woman on the moon.
Brilliant.
And possibly the first person of colour on the lunar surface. Now, this announcement on its own caused like loads of fuss on Twitter. The kind of Twitter fuss that goes around with things like that. But
oh my god, yes.
I thought it's worth mentioning here that whoever gets chosen, they get chosen because of their competence to do the job. So this isn't like there was a bloke that was better at it. That's just not the case. As in, whoever steps foot on the moon next are people that have thoroughly deserved to be there and have done that, through their competence to do the job. And so really the big issue really is to get as many people to apply for these astronaut roles as possible from lots of different backgrounds, because once you go through the selection process, obviously the same percentage of each ethnic group or however you split these groups up will be represented once they've gone through the selection process.
Yeah.
If you listen to our Didier Schmidt interview, that's a really interesting part of it, how you kind of end up with the same percentage as you started with. So they are chosen from competence. So I think that's pretty important.
If there's ever a case for the diversity only being a contributing factor, it is this, because, you know, the two people that are going there need to be the most competent for the job. It's not like we're talking about them given a job, you know, in a factory or a teaching job or something, which is also super important, of course, I understand this, but with the literal peril involved in this, if as Twitter might suggest, it was just a diversity conspiracy, it'd be just the daftest thing to send somebody you there who happens to be a person of colour but is incompetent. It's just not, it doesn't work like that, you know?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And it's just, it's weird, and I do get it. I kind of get it why people are sort of, you know, the fact that we're even talking about it is really annoying, I have to say.
Yeah.
But we have to, really. And I think, you know, it's important that everyone feels represented, and we know that the sort of broader you put your net in terms of the type of people that you get doing a job, the better that job will be done. And that's that. That's the bottom line. And that's just evidenced. So, yeah, there we go. But anyway, the rough plan. We should talk about the rough plan. So, SLS. See, this is the weird thing about the plan, is that it doesn't involve a launch on Starship. It involves a launch of SLS. So, SLS will launch 4 astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft.
Yeah.
The Orion spacecraft will travel from Earth to the Moon and get into what's called a near rectilinear halo orbit.
Oh,
right.
Sounds painful.
Now, yeah, which is actually where the gateway will orbit there as well. But this time, Orion will orbit there on its own. So it'll go out to the Moon and orbit in this bizarre orbit, very different to Apollo. Apollo went round the sort of middle, whereas this one sort of goes up and down over the poles. And so it can be seen from Earth for the entire orbit. In other words, you can communicate with it for the entire time. But it also gives you access to the South Pole, Shackleton Crater in particular, where there is all this water ice that can be used for rocket fuel and breathable air once we start setting up a lunar base there. So that's why they want to do it like that. There's a couple of reasons why they want to get into this bizarre orbit, 3,000 kilometers high at one point and 7,000 kilometers high at another point. So it's an eccentric orbit, unlike this circular orbit that Apollo used to do. But the Apollo was a nightmare because you were doing things like all your engine burns at the far side of the Moon, out of contact with Earth. So mission control didn't know whether they'd been successful or not. So, you know, it's super stressful. And of course, mission control can offer no help all the time you're on at the far side of the Moon.
Of course, but I think that's the ability to actually, and the time it's going to take to get into that orbit, is that going to be a factor? Yeah,
it is a factor. So, I mean, a lot of energy is wasted getting into that orbit, which is why I believe that Apollo, you could get to the Moon's surface in one go. You know, you just stack up an enormous rocket and off you go, and then you can take back off and get back to Earth, all in the same system. SLS and Orion can't do that. It's just not powerful enough to go to the Moon and come back again. It just doesn't have the delta V, as they say. And so, but also they want to do it differently anyway. Because of getting to the South Pole. You couldn't get to the South Pole using Saturn V either. So the Apollo profile wouldn't have suited that either. So you have to do it completely differently. So you've got Orion now doing orbits of the Moon. And now the SpaceX Starship would dock with the Orion and take 2 of the astronauts from the Orion down to the surface of the Moon, stay there a week, and then take back off again, up back up to the Orion and then dock with the Orion, and then the Orion would fly back to Earth. and then you'd land, and then you would land in the Orion capsule. So it's complicated, and apparently this is all going to happen in 3 years' time, which let's face it. How likely does that sound?
Do you know what? I think they're going to do it. I think that I'm totally behind. I'm completely have faith in them. I think they're going to do it. I'm going to put money on it and everything.
Well. Kathy Lourdes says, with this award, NASA and our partners will complete the first crewed demonstration mission to the surface of the moon in the 21st century as the agency takes a step forward for women's equality and long-term deep space exploration. So obviously, SpaceX has been working with NASA to get this right, and obviously they've been super impressive with their engineering, safety, and all the other things. One of the things that they're sort of like kick-ass is, of course, that they've actually built the hardware. They've actually built this hardware. They've been flying it, but there's a few things in here that I think they won the contract. The obvious one is the value for money, right?
Yeah.
You've got to have value for money, and SpaceX is that in spades. I mean, after all, a lot of what they've done, they finance themselves. They've been developing Starship regardless. They haven't been waiting for government money to do it, so they've just been getting on and doing it.
Which is phenomenal. It is actually incredible. They're not reliant on these, funding. That's the incredible use of wealth. I mean, I've been saying this so much, but that's a truly unique thing. I think they deserve it, genuinely.
Well, SpaceX, just the pure management of it all, the fact that they are doing things correctly. I mean, if you think about the last time that NASA handed out contracts to SpaceX and Boeing, well, Boeing still aren't going to be flying Starliner with crew until at least 2022 now. So it's, thank goodness they did give that contract to SpaceX. Otherwise, America still wouldn't have replaced the space shuttle and be able to fly astronauts to the space station. But, I mean, obviously there is a little bit of a problem in the fact that NASA couldn't really afford to have redundancy here. So they couldn't afford to have a second team in the running, which is clearly a good thing to do. I mean, going back to that case of SpaceX versus Boeing for the crew, crew missions to the ISS, that worked out really well. That there was a competition and SpaceX kind of have won, but without that redundancy, it could have been Starliner the one and SpaceX having those problems. So, you kind of want completely redundant systems.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, the biggest thing is the sustainability element of it. You've got the other systems and all they can do really is land on the moon. Whereas if you think about Starship, it's so future looking, isn't it? As in, if you can get this right and it works, then suddenly Mars opens up. Mars doesn't open up with the other two teams' landing capability. It doesn't change anything for Mars or anything else.
That's
but
a
also,
great point. That's a really great point.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And building a lunar base as well. The fact is really those two craft can't really take anything more than a bit of cargo and a couple of astronauts. Whereas clearly Starship is absolutely freaking massive and will be able to deliver tons of cargo down to the surface of the moon. So, when you're looking forward to building a lunar base, that's going to be massive. That is huge. So, that sustainability of it is like you're spending money and it's much more long-term, the money that you're spending, I think, with Starship, as long as it works.
It just looks fantastic. That's the thing. I was saying back, I thought it was a mistake. It looks amazing.
But, you've got this huge spacious cabin as well. So for the astronauts going down, it's going to be loads more comfortable. You've got 2 airlocks, which of course makes the whole system much safer. If you've only got one airlock, that goes wrong, you're kind of stuffed. And in fact, as Julio pointed out, it was only thanks to the fact that Buzz Aldrin had a pen on him that he was able to shut the door properly on Apollo 11 and get off the moon.
Incredible, yeah.
And you think, so having a couple of airlocks is pretty useful as well. Well, more than useful, gets way more stuff down to there. The other interesting thing is this,
but they're still
this
going
ability.
to take a pen, aren't they? I mean, if I was going down, I'd still take a pen.
Oh, I'd definitely take a pen anyway. Right, so I could write down my thoughts. No, I thought a really interesting one was the fact that Starship does all its refueling and sort of complex tasks it has to do in low Earth orbit. So instead of flying out to the moon to assemble and to fuel up, it does that all in low Earth orbit, which could be a massive advantage because it clearly logistically that might be better in terms of less dangerous and easier to sort out problems when it's nearby.
Yeah.
So little things like that might be the things that are impressing NASA. I mean, it's still odd. I think there's some massive hurdles. I mean, it's going to go down really badly with Congress. I mean, they're already moaning about, why have they done this when there isn't even a permanent NASA administrator? Why have they even announced it? But obviously the old pork rolling type thing of all these different states having a stake in these massive engineering companies, it doesn't quite work with SpaceX because, it's this private company that is very self-contained. So Congress will hate it.
It's almost like there's a problem with the political structure of the United States.
You think? I mean, it's not just the United States. It's not just the United States, is it either? I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it? When you want government money to do things, clearly that has to be lobbied for. And I guess there's nothing wrong with lobbying, but I guess lobbying now is becoming a dirtier and dirtier word because of all the people that lobby badly or, not in good faith.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got it in this country in spades at the moment, haven't we? So cronyism, we call it over here, and in the States, I guess it's got a slightly different name. But it's the same everywhere. It's probably better than the Russian system, where instead of like bunging someone a few fivers, you get taken round the back of the bike sheds and have a Kalashnikov stuck in your mouth. or a bit of polonium slipped in your tea.
Oh,
that kind of stuff.
Topical right now.
I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? Basically, there's dodgy stuff going all around. All around, isn't there? I think another massive advantage of this, by the way, is having SpaceX involved at this level. When the Artemis thing starts to build up a head of steam in terms of public awareness, because I still think the public really aren't aware of Artemis at all, really. But when it actually comes closer to sending people to the moon again, and SpaceX are involved with Starship, I think that will be super inspirational and exciting for the general public.
Definitely, the foundations of PR that they've put down are incredible. The work they've done to get the world excited about space travel again is amazing.
And I guess if the money starts to slip a little bit, the thing is, Elon Musk is able to sort of raise funds by just clicking his fingers, it seems. So Musk is determined to build Starship anyway. I mean, it helps that he's got $3 billion off NASA to do it, but he's going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, it seems to me that it's a really safe bet on that front as well. It's a project that, if it doesn't work, it's like, actually, it will still work because you've got the determination of someone that always delivers behind it. I mean, we should mention one thing, which is back to that point of SLS launching Orion to go to the moon to transfer into a Starship. And you think, well, if Starship can take off on the super heavy booster, why bother with SLS and Orion at all? So I think that is going to be something that starts to really roll out as an argument over the next few years, because SLS is insanely expensive, and clearly that money might be better spent elsewhere. And if Musk starts to demonstrate Super Heavy and Starship, and is able to deliver it super cheaply. And you think, well, you could cut that bit out. The only thing I would say in Orion's defense is I think the launch escape element of it, in terms of the safety, is clearly better for landing on Earth.
Yeah.
I still would not be comfortable with a Starship. Not for at least a decade. You know, that looks a decade away at best. But I mean, we go back to that original. The reason why I put that Wilbur Wright quote in is just how wrong you can be, even when you're the expert in flight. He's thinking it's going to take longer than it did, and it only took him 2 years. You know, and that's the person doing it. He's like got the opposite of Elon Musk syndrome there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people are the opposite of Elon Musk.
Well, I hope I am. But I know my wealth status is very much the opposite of Elon Musk's. There's lots of technical issues still, I guess. You've got refueling in space, never been done. Although we will go to something that's similar later on in the episode, a little bit of news. But refueling in space, never been done, and that has to happen. So there has to be several Starship launches, some of them carrying fuel that then refuel this lunar version of the Starship. So it's not just a normal Starship. It's not going to have the wings, the little wings that you see on the current Starship. There's no point, obviously, because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. So there's no belly flop maneuver. So that, I mean, in some ways, that's better because there's no belly flop maneuver, and obviously that's hard.
Yeah.
But it also means they can't be using the Raptors on the bottom of the rocket, because that would make a massive crater on the moon. So they've got to have this ring of engines around the top to actually do the landing. So they've got to design all that, and they think it's going to be a new engine to do that, because they don't think the Super Dracos on the Dragon, for example, are powerful enough.
Right.
It's going to have bigger legs, but that's okay, because I suppose they've got the leg technology from the Dragon, from the Falcon. The weird one that I don't get is when the lunar version of Starship is out at the moon, does it stay there, or will it fly back to the Earth to refuel again in low Earth orbit and go back? And how many of this special lunar one will actually get built? In which case, if it's only a couple of them, or even just one, it's going to be an expensive vehicle. But I guess if it's built on the same architecture, like the stainless steel rings that the normal Starship's built from, then I guess they can do it reasonably cheap. But there's a load of unanswered questions, which is why this announcement was just so extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely amazing, but I'm so excited to find out how.
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is that the contract's there now, so SpaceX can really start fleshing this out. And if we really are serious about 2024, it means that they have to flesh it out in a hurry as well.
Yeah,
like we might see leaps and bounds down at Boca Chica on Starship development. I mean, it's epic, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Just imagine them putting the proposal together, and there's bits of Tesla design in there by mistake. It's like, oh God, we really have to throw this together. Drawn by Elon's daughter. Oh, just put it on the PowerPoint behind him.
Elon Musk's, sits over quite a lot of intellectual property that is quite useful for doing stuff like this.
Definitely.
Again, makes him really an exciting individual. Now, sticking with SpaceX and human spaceflight, we've actually got another SpaceX Crew mission coming up as well. But it was the end of Expedition 64 this week. So the two Sergeys, Ryzhikov and Kudzvetchkov, they came back down with Kate Rubins.
Welcome back.
On MS-17. After Ryzhikov had handed over command to Shannon Walker, he said, "It was an amazing time, and it was unforgettable. There were many unforgettable events during our increment." And then Walker then said to Rychikov, "It has truly been the teamwork and the camaraderie that has made it very special."
Do I sense a bit of a romance there?
Possibly. If only back on Earth, the States and Russia, well, if only everyone was getting on as well as they do on the International Space Station.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ah.
Never a true word said.
Currently, the ISS had a lot of people on board at that point for a couple of weeks, but now it's got Michael Hopkins, Victor Glover, Mark Van der Heij, Sochi Noguchi, Oleg Novitsky, and Piotr Dubrov. And this week, they'll potentially have the arrival of SpaceX Crew 2 of Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, Akihiko Hoshide, and Thomas Biscuit. And they're gonna be launching on April the 22nd, which should be really exciting. Now, this, I don't know why this should be bigger news. Again, I guess it's because the SpaceX news just keeps coming and coming and coming. So the launch vehicle's out at Pad 39. So both the Dragon and the Falcon 9 have been flown before, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first time a spacecraft has been used again since the space shuttle finished in 2011. So that's a decade later. Wow! But it's the first ever booster reused for human spaceflight. That's never happened before.
Incredible.
And it's the same booster that was used on Crew 1. So when you watched Glover, Hopkins, and Noguchi and Walker going up on Crew 1, that was the same booster as they're using this time round. And get this, the actual Dragon is the same that they used on Demo 2, which was Doug and Bob when they went up.
Yeah.
And here's the little factette that I just spotted, was that Megan MacArthur, who's literally about 10 days older than I am, she actually was the last person to touch the Hubble with the Canadarm, but she's never been to the ISS. So she's a veteran of Space Shuttle, but she never went to the ISS. But she is married to Bob Behnken. So the craft that she's going up to the ISS in is the same one that her husband flew last year.
That is great. That is so cool.
That must be the first time that's happened.
Yeah,
definitely. I would have thought. Oh, maybe not. Maybe there's been a husband and wife team that have gone on the same shuttle at different times. Damn,
that's
to look that up. But I mean,
that's a Spodcat.
That is a Spod. Yeah, yeah. There we go. So if anyone knows whether a husband and wife team went up on the same shuttle but at different times, if not, that's a first. Yeah. But I think that's very cool. Their poor son. How is it a comfort that his mum is going up on the same craft as his dad survived on, or does it make it more stressful?
Yeah, well, he knows it works.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's flight proven, or is it flight knackered?
Oh,
it's hard, isn't it?
That's the balance.
It's like when you take a car off the showroom floor.
Yeah.
You take it out for a drive. You've got a feeling that it might break, but once you've been driving it around for a year or two, and it hasn't broke, you get confident in it.
Yeah.
But when it starts to get a little bit old, you start losing confidence in it again. There's a kind of sweet spot, isn't there, with reusability? But I think reusability
this is going to be in the sweet spot. It needs to be for the post.
Yeah, this is it must be in the sweet spot because NASA have okayed it. So this is and it's got a few upgrades. There are a few upgrades, like the heat tiles have been slightly upgraded, and I think the Super Dracos have been slightly upgraded so they can work in higher winds or something like that. So there's a few things in there, but so many things happened on that on Expedition 64. And Kate Rubins, even though she's a cancer doctor and doing lots and lots of experiments, she also did EVAs out there. So she's spent over a day now in EVAs.
Wow.
So over 24, she's done over 24 hours out in the cold vacuum of space. And yeah, the two Sergis, of course, were the first people to use the Poisk module to go out on their EVA to ready the station for the Norca. So that a lot of work on the space station itself was done by Expedition 64, getting it ready for new solar panels and new modules and stuff like that, as well as doing lots and lots of experiments.
I've been a bit out of touch lately. Did they fix the Russian bit?
No, it's still a little bit leaky.
Oh, God.
It's getting old. Yeah, I mean, the fact is, yeah, the Russian bit is getting old. I mean, they are getting rid of the Piers module and replacing it with Norca and the European arm, which has been sitting in a crate for decades.
Yeah.
Should have gone up ages ago. But yeah, so the Russian bit's getting an upgrade at least.
Nice. That's good to know.
SpaceX have given up trying to catch fairings, by the way.
Oh,
The two boats that go out and with their massive nets trying to catch bits of fairing, unfortunately, have been retired.
No one likes a quitter, SpaceX. No one likes a quitter.
I think they've tried it, they've managed it, and then it turns out that the whole expense of it and the danger of it, I think, is not worth it.
Oh, all right.
That they're better at just fishing them out the ocean and doing it that way, I think.
Yeah.
Let's face it, space news, unfortunately, is becoming a bit like SpaceX news.
It is. I hope no one's actually playing the drinking game because, like, they'd be absolutely on the floor right now.
Well, we've had to abandon the drinking game because the government sent me a letter saying that due to the popularity of SpaceX, it's now considered dangerous to play it on the podcast, so it's been banned.
It's contributing to epidemic. Plus, we've got such a big listenership of scientists as well, and we don't want them rotting their brains.
I have a feeling from the scientists that I've met that they're one of the hardest boozing communities.
Quality.
They do love a good booze up. I don't know what it is. They're often into sort of beers. That's what I find. British scientists are into their beers, you know, craft beers, and reading books by Michael Jackson for camera, that kind of thing. Not Michael Jackson, the singer.
Yeah,
obviously.
I figured.
And a lot of those scientists drink their beer out of leather tankards. Of course, I'm very much stereotyping them. It's ridiculous. Right, I want to talk about a non-SpaceX story. How about that?
Yeah,
there's a couple actually that we should rush.
Finally.
God, we filled quite a lot of time here, but I want to talk about two things. One is the Mission Extension Vehicle 2, and this is another spectacular moment, really. So that back on the 15th of August 2020 on Ariane 5, they launched this MEV2 vehicle. And on the 13th of April, it managed to join itself with this 5.5-ton Intelsat satellite. Now, this satellite has been running out of fuel. It was launched itself in 2004, and it serves 18 million households around Europe with TV. Yeah. Right, so it's a pretty important satellite.
Absolutely.
It does lots of broadband. Yeah, it does lots of broadband for South America, Africa, Middle East, and all that kind of stuff as well. So this thing is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Right? It's a big old 5.5-ton geostationary satellite. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it other than the fact it's running out of fuel, and so it's unable really to carry on doing its own station keeping. Because of the weird wobble of Earth and all those kind of things, you've got to stay in the correct position. You can only do that using fuel. It's running out of fuel, and so but it's perfectly functional. Other than that, so we talked about refueling in space and how hard it is. MEV2 doesn't do that. So what MEV2 is another large-ish satellite that flies up to geostationary orbit, which is 22,000 miles above the Earth, a little bit more, in fact. 22,236 miles above the Earth, geostationary orbit.
Yeah.
Which is where satellites like that, that the orbital speed is basically the same as the speed of the Earth's rotation, so it stays above the same spot. It's often known as the Clark orbit, because Arthur C. Clarke was the first one to point out how useful it would be for this kind of thing, for telecommunications. So good old Arthur C. Clarke, have to mention him pretty much every episode because he's such a ledge.
Pure ledge.
But yes, pure legend. So MEV-2 has clipped onto this Intelsat satellite and is now going to be providing the fuel and the propulsion to do the station keeping. So in other words, it's kind of like a satellite that's clipped onto the old satellite and is allowing that satellite to have at least another 5 years of usable service.
That's great. That's really great. Like, just clamp it on, make a few adjustments there, and off it goes. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's really good because it's environmentally friendly, because it means that you're building less satellites when you don't need to and launching these heavy things as well. And so it must be environmentally better. It must be better for space debris as well, because you avoid, you're putting less and less things up. And Northrop Grumman reckon that this market's worth over $3 billion over the next decade. And they're hoping to do this with another 75 satellites.
It's great. I love it.
Again, it's another big game-changing movement. Again, around reusability, really, isn't it? And sustainability. This week has got a couple of biggies, isn't it, really, with the Crew 2 and MEV-2. That's great. And, of course, possibly the most epic thing of the week is... is a helicopter maybe flying on another planet. So the first ever aircraft flight on another planet, which is another reason for choosing, Wilbur right at the top of the show.
What a quote. Absolutely nailed it with that one, Matt. This is incredible. I can't believe it. That's the stuff that you really like, that you really need to get the kids excited about, and I did some workshops about writing poems about Mars the other day, and I was just talking to them for about 20 minutes about the helicopter because it was just like, this is just mind-blowing stuff. It's just unreal.
Yeah, and it might happen today as the podcast comes out. That they're going to give it its first flight, and obviously there's been a few teething problems, but they've not been major problems. The fact is that Ingenuity is on the surface. It's managed to do high speed spin tests with the helicopter blades. There was a few sort of software issues which they've sent new commands and stuff like that. So on Wilbur Wright's birthday, April the 16th, Ingenuity successfully passed the full speed spin test. And so, yes, it's kind of good to go, but, they're still playing it cautiously, obviously. But yeah.
If it went wrong that first time, it's just, you can only get this right once. But this is a technology demonstrator, so if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. But hopefully it'll go right, because there's so much that can come from this. It's brilliant. But here's a little interesting fact of staying with the Wright brothers. There's a small piece of the Wright brothers' wing from that original aircraft that's underneath Ingenuity's solar panel. Oh, I'm blown away by that. Absolutely blown away. It's incredible. Yeah, so, amazing.
So which is the second time that's happened. So it was also the case that a small piece went on the lunar module, the Eagle, with Neil Armstrong.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah. So
in 60.
So it's like
in 69, and so. Yeah, there's one on the moon, there's one on Mars, and what would they think?
Yeah.
What would the Wright brothers think if they heard?
Well, I mean, incredible. The insane thing about the Wright brothers is it's only 118 years ago.
Yeah,
it's not that long ago, is it? It's only a little bit older than Prince Philip was when he died.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's insane. Yeah. It's quite recent that the first plane was made, and now we've got a helicopter about to take flight on the surface of Mars.
There's no words. Honestly, there's no words, man.
It's going to fly about 5 meters high at most. So that's 16 feet. And it's going to be for about 90 seconds. So hopefully we might see a press release and actually see this. And what would be cool is that we might see the video from Ingenuity itself and, of course, from Perseverance, so that we can have multiple angles of this really cool event actually happening. It's going to be absolutely genius.
Yeah, completely.
And if all this goes well, it will be really cool information for other missions to Mars, but also in 10 years' time, they're planning to sending a helicopter to Titan called the Dragonfly. So that it might be really cool for that as well. I mean, I am so chuffed. This week is going to be full of space stuff. I mean, it's probably one of the most chock-a-block space weeks ever.
I know. I'm so happy to be on this episode. Like all the news this week is just like absolutely blown my mind.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on in space right now.
Yeah.
It's what a great week to have a space news episode.
It's a space mark week.
Lots of space marks.
Didn't do anything today on my birthday though, did they? Still, you know.
No, they never do. They keep your birthday especially quiet, so that the BBC may one day, or like you get to 6 o'clock news and they said, nothing's really happened today. Absolutely incredible. One last piece of news is a little bit worrying. A OneWeb and a Starlink, SpaceX Starlink, only just missed each other this week. Oof. So that was one of those US Space Force had to tell them that I put them on red alert and say, you're going to get dangerously close here. And OneWeb had to do the maneuver to actually miss. So that's pretty, it was a small percentage chance that they would hit, but that's, if they do hit, that might be the end of space constellations, because it's just ridiculous that it seems it's the accident waiting to happen, isn't it?
It is.
It really is a bit of it.
It's a bit of a nightmare. It's a crowded place up there.
And not only is it crowded, but SpaceX are launching next week another bunch of Starlinks on the 28th of April. So yet another 60 go up, and another 36 OneWebs go up on the 25th of April from a Soyuz. So that's another 96, almost 100 new satellites this week. And then, well, in fact, it's over 100 satellites this week, because you've got a Delta IV Heavy lifting a military payload, the NROL 82 reconnaissance payload. So that's always ace to see a Delta IV Heavy. Not many of them left, so definitely worth watching. Long March 6 is launching a couple of Earth observation satellites as well. But we also see, and let's hope it goes well, a return to flight since the November 2020 launch failure for Vega from Kourou, of course. So that should be exciting as well. So that's another bunch of small satellites going up as well.
Good luck to them as well,
No, absolutely. So that definitely needs good luck. So at least over 100 satellites are going up this week, and it just keeps coming, Chris, because the Chinese are going to start building their space station this week as well. So it looks like a Long March 5B is going to start taking up the core module of the Chinese space station. So, yep, another massive bit of space news to finish on. Incredible.
What a week. What a week, Matthew.
What a week this is going to be. It's absolutely absurd. That's the 29th of April. So I suppose it doesn't quite fit in this week, but over the next couple of weeks, we are talking big news. Anyway, Chris, I hope you've enjoyed your birthday space news catch-up.
I can't think of a better way to spend my birthday. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, happy birthday, Chris.
Thank you.
42, very special age, 42.
Certainly is. I'm hoping to discover that meaning.
No, literally, just before you go to bed, sleep tonight.
Yeah.
It will all become clear. We're not really, people over the age of 42 aren't really supposed to talk about this, but as you're about to go to sleep, everything will become clear.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's an amazing moment. It's an amazing moment.
Fantastic.
Chris, if people want to look at the show notes, where would they go?
If I was going to look at the show notes, I would go to interplanetary.org.uk.
Oh, that's such a great place to go for show notes.
What a lovely website.
Yeah, and if you want to join, like quite a few people have over the last few weeks, be more involved and come onto our Discord, etc., come to www.patreon.com/interplanetary, or just follow the Patreon link from the normal website.
You know it makes sense.
Absolutely. I hope you have a beautiful birthday week.
Thank you, Matthew. And you have a lovely week too.
I'm going to say bye-bye to the Spudcats. Watch this. Bye-bye, Spudcats!
Bye, Spudcats.
Till next time.
Bye, Spudcats. Bye, Spudcats.
For more fun in space.